Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the June installment of To Catch a Fraudster. I'm Tom, for those of you that I have not had the privilege to meet, one of the co-founders and serve as executive chairman of Certified. The point of our monthly webinars, To Catch a Fraudster, is to really highlight where the fraud landscape is moving and bringing you actionable either insights, stories, or in today's case, more of a roadmap of what do we do as business leaders when our scope has really changed substantially over the last several years. So if we go back 10 years, it was, search the public record and make sure the commitment looks good, clear title, get escrow prepped, everything balances, deliver a good closing experience, final policy, safe disbursement, keys, garage door opener in exchange for a check. And now we find ourselves having to manage a much more intentional process around security and wire transfers or just funds transfers in general. So without diving too deep, the goal today is really to focus on how you could position your business, position your culture. Think about this not as just, one more thing that I got to invest in, one more thing that I got to manage. It's not going away. So how do you embrace it and kind of win against it, becoming a security-focused organization? And if you have questions throughout, I'm going to introduce the speakers in a minute. If you have questions throughout, put them in the YouTube chat and we'll respond to those here in real time. I could not be more excited to introduce our speakers today. First, our guest, David Bravo Jr. I just love your name. I mean, this is a winning name in life, David. I just got to say, I don't know if anybody's framed it that way for you, but that's good stuff, man. Owner of Monarch Title, and Lisa Dombrowski, who is partner in Vintage Title. We have the coast to coast covered. I'm in the Midwest. So other than maybe someone from the South, and I know many are tuning in, we at least got the shorelines covered. If you don't mind, guys, maybe introduce yourself really quick, and then I want to run through some stats, and we're going to get into the grit of all of our respective journeys to become a more security-focused, kind of security-minded organization, and then how we brought that out to our communities. So, Lisa, I'm gonna have you go first, if you don't mind. Maybe just thank you and welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you, Tom. Nice to meet you all. My name is Lisa Dombrowski. My husband and I own Vintage Title Services. We're located in Sayreville, New Jersey. I am currently CFO of the company. We are a full service licensed in New Jersey. We service all 21 counties. We specialize in delivering a boutique experience for residential and commercial real estate transactions.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you. And David, tell us a little bit about yourself.
First off, pleasure to meet you, Lisa. Thank you for having me on. David Bravo Jr. Heavy as the crown to have the name. The Bravo name, to your point, man, it's pretty cool. I grew up in real estate, born and bred. Mom's a broker, dad's a legendary title guy. Stepmom owned an escrow, an independent escrow here in SoCal, and stepdad did loans, so it was pick your pleasure. I'm the CEO for Monarch Title Company. We're an emerging company licensed throughout California, and we've had our own fraud experiences in the past, which has obviously led to this conversation. So we have a growing, expansive kind of footprint here in SoCal, but we look forward to getting up north and then probably pushing to the western states as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great markets. Well, I want to run through the numbers real quick. Why are companies kind of leaning in and making security more central to one's brand? So if you look at just some current stats, and by the way, the Internet Crime Complaint Center that tracks, that's the FBI's tracking mechanism for all forms of cybercrime. Their most recent annual report posted up just under $500 million in real estate wire related losses, business email compromise, it's formally referred to. 17% of all title agents last year wired to the wrong account, and half of those did so more than once. So between the IC3, some stats that we have, and Altus stats, the other thing interesting about the report in 2024 versus 2023, cybercrime went up by a third, but the number of complaints went down by 2%. So now we're seeing this disparity where fewer, and I don't even know if it's really fewer. I think that's just kind of a flat year from reporting. There's so much that goes unreported, but they're focused on larger, more valuable targets, and real estate being one of the most valuable, unfortunately. From our state of wire fraud report, we found that first-time home buyers, or those that are kind of in the real estate transaction for the first time, are 3 times more likely to be defrauded than others that have gone through a buy or a sell previously, from 7.5% to 2.3% for those repeat customers. But it's 3 times more likely to be hit if you're first into your first time into the transaction. The other interesting question that we asked in our State of Wire Fraud report that was published earlier this year is, does a customer value security? And the question was like, would you pay more to secure your experience? And 79% of respondents of this new question from this year's report said, I absolutely would. And the way I read that is interesting. It's not that we need to charge for it. It's that there's value there that I think, and I think you'll see that after this conversation, if you're trying to pass a $35 or $40, whatever fee you think about, increasing, I think you could get exponentially more credit in market by positioning your brand against something that the consumer is worried about. The consumer is absolutely worried about their data, they're worried about their personal information, and they're worried about their funds transfer. And we're going to pick at that quite a bit as we go through this. The other thing that they believe is that we're responsible. They believe brokerage, title and escrow, mortgage lending, and law is responsible. Like, hey, I hired you and you told me whether or not the washer machine vibrated at high speed, but you never told me that I could lose my life savings in a single wire for my closing obligation funds. Or you never mentioned that I need to be on the lookout for a random email that's asking me to wire funds. So the framing against this is the problems here. Real estate will continue to be a growing focus because the numbers are just too large not to invest in and continue to invest in. Generative AI is going to put social in, and already has, but is going to continue to challenge our ability to defend against social engineering, and consumers want it. So there's the framing. With that, David, I'm gonna flip it over to you, and let's talk about you got a crazy story. We all have crazy stories, right? I'm a wire fraud victim back in 2015, litigated for 2 years, Department of Justice trial. I won't belabor that point, but tell us about your story, David.
So I took over as CEO for Monarch Title in 2020. September of 2020, and we really started scaling. We're obviously a younger company. We started from nothing, and we scaled to a dozen employees and teammates, and then we kept growing, and we entered into 2021 with more growth in mind. At that time, I had obviously I knew of wire fraud, but as a young, very very young emerging company, to my downfall, or to my own criticism, I always felt like we were too small to be on anyone's radar. Simply too small. We have a dozen, 15 employees. No one's ever heard of Monarch Title. We're not out there. We don't have a huge online presence. We're kind of just a little homegrown local title company that's just really, really starting to hit stride. And to my own downfall, I simply felt like we're too small to ever get noticed by anyone even looking to defraud anyone. That being said, we still had very, very good people in place, and that was my security blanket. I had some of the best people in place for our payoff department. So fast forward, December of 2021 comes along, and I'm prepared to celebrate another kind of scaling up year. And I remember getting a call from our payoff department, and he says, "Hey, something's really, really wrong here. I just got a call from our bank, and we may have an issue." And it was at that moment, my heart started skipping a beat because I had kind of poured my life and soul into this process. The quick story in a nutshell was we got hacked. Two people fell to a phishing scam, and they were able to get into our internal emails as a company. They were the worst two people possible that we could have ever had gotten hacked. And what they were doing was they were waiting for someone internally to send a payoff demand to our payoff department. And they were watching. They watched for, they say 2 weeks. They just watched the process happen. And when they struck us, when they hit us, what they were doing was grabbing that email with the payoff demand, immediately archiving it on the receiver side, immediately grabbing it, archiving it, adjusting, doctoring the demand, putting fraudulent wire instructions on there, and then resending it on our employees' behalf to the payoff department. There was no way of really, and you got to understand, we were also remote at this time. This is still 2021 in California, so we were still remote. So there was some lack of communication there. But even if the employees would have picked up the phone and dialed, I don't think anything would have came of it, because if you call someone and say, "Did you just send me this demand?" like we do 1,000 times a month, they would say, "Yeah, I just sent it to you right now." So sure enough, we fell victim of $1.45 million in 2021. We flat out lost as a company. And I have to tell you something, as a young emerging company, who's trying to scale, who's trying to, establish themselves in the marketplace, if I could be completely honest, that brought us to our knees. It really, really did. I get chills talking about it, because that sort of loss, I mean, if that thing says 2.45, or dare I say 3.45, we're all looking for a job. I can't stress that enough. Like, every single person at Monarch Title is looking for a job. So I'm blessed that it was only 1.45. We were able to absorb that. We did have insurance. We did have coverage. It took us 3 years to settle with the insurance company. We got half of it back. We had to hire a contingent attorney, so we didn't even get all half of it back. But I'm grateful that we recuperated something. But make no mistake, like, I don't care if you're the biggest title company out there or the smallest title company out there hitting stride, you have to protect these wires. You just have to. Now we almost have too much processes and procedures and systems in place, like certified, but I would rather sleep peacefully every single night knowing that we're probably redundant on our practices, knowing that Monarch Title's protected and the consumer's protected as well. That goes for the seller and the buyer. So I sleep at peace now.
No, thank you for sharing. I remember when I was being read into our fraud experience at Sun Title, and time, it's like the information was coming to me in frames, like time stopped, and I know exactly where I was, I know exactly what she said. This is our executive assistant at the time, and it's personal. I mean, you're victimized. It's personal.
My mom was with me at the time, and she thought someone had died, like someone had passed away, and she was so concerned. She said, "What's going on? What's wrong with you?" I said, "Mom, we're getting hit with fraud." And I'm learning of the files one by one, because we stopped everything and we audited every single files. So every single time I got a call, it was another, I knew we got hit again, and we just hadn't seen it yet. We hadn't found it. And she said my face looked flush, and like the blood was leaving my head, because I felt sick to my stomach, because I'm the leader of Monarch Title. This is my watch. This is my ship. People have come to this company because they believe in me and what we're going to build. And I felt so sick to my stomach, thinking like I could possibly, we could possibly unravel right here in real time. And so, like you said, man, I remember every single one of those calls, and it was like a nightmare every time my phone rang. That being said, we got through it. We now have certified, and we're good to go.
We're going to get to that. But I think another thing, and Lisa, I'm going to get to you, but we all have a number, right? Everyone has a number that you're not going to come back from if there wasn't a recovery. We happen to lose 180, but probably similar to you. I mean, we wire out way over our insurance skis on a daily basis, so, and we'll get into insurance, in a few minutes. But David, I just so appreciate you having the courage to share your story, because there's so many others that I was addressing a large group a week and a half ago, and I said there's two title companies that wake up in the morning. One that's gone through a wire fraud, and one that's about to. And you just have to decide, like, how prepared. Is it going to be an actual direct hit, or is it going to be a really close miss where operating procedure and technology and everything kind of came together, the gear slowed down, and by the Lord's grace, money didn't move. But I also think, again, you're such a great intro. I'm too small to be a target. Like, who's going to pick on me, right? So, Lisa, I'll let you pull that thread first and share your story.
We're a small title agency, and they pick on us daily. We actually had just signed up with Certified, and in the same week, we had a fraudulent payoff. We have all the firewalls, encryption, everything set up. They got into our email system. They were watching emails. The fraudsters put rules and permissions in place, so we weren't getting the true emails. They were, and changing them. We had a payoff sent over, and we still call to verify every single wiring instruction. But when you're sending a payoff, the banks don't talk to you. They ask you if you have an authorization. They don't want to talk to you. But we ran it through Certified, and one of my employees came to me and she said, we still didn't get this back yet from them. I just did one yesterday and it came back right away. She says, what do I do? I said, we're going to wait. And sure enough, it came back, and it was high risk, and it said, do not proceed with this payoff. And then we had called the bank, the lender, and they had said that these are not our wiring instructions. So that payoff was almost $500,000. That would have shut our doors.
So thankfully you didn't have to go through what David and I went through, right? And knock on wood, you won't. But you still felt, I mean, that was a moment of change. And walk me through what you left that experience with, because now I want to guide more into, like, what have we all done, and what was easy about it, what was hard about it, and kind of the mess in between.
You feel violated. You just feel violated. You have all these procedures and rules set in place, and these fraudsters are smart. They, unless you have something concrete like Certified in place, they're going to get through. They're going to get through to you.
In no order, guys. I want to. So when our fraud hit, there was no Certified. There was reconciliation software and positive pay. And you bring up a good point, Lisa, that sometimes you don't even get to talk to the lender. You're just keying in the information off of the payoff authorization, and then magically appears the payoff demand, or the payoff letter that we refer to it as. Could you walk me through, maybe David, I'll start with you, like, walk me through what you did. Like, you were there, and that was, again, both these happened to be payoffs. Ours was a seller net. Know that everybody's at risk. I would say the buyer's probably most at risk if they're not read into this issue, because they're just getting absolutely annihilated right now. But But what did you do, and what were kind of the themes of that journey from victim to now call it victor, or at least, we're out, you had mentioned it, maybe we have too many locks and cameras and chains on the gate, but no one's getting through.
What did we do? Everything that was required to make sure that it would never happen again. And by the way, it's not like a one-time deal. We've gone through several experiences after that, like Lisa, that we've been able to stop and make sure that we protect ourselves from that. But it wasn't like, they came and they hit. And I remember talking to the fraud detective for the LA Commercial Crime Division, and I also got the chance to talk to the Secret Service. And I remember one of the biggest warnings that they gave me was, when they find someone that they've been able to hit before, trust in knowing that they're not just going to go away. They're going to come stronger and harder, and they'll tell their friends, and they're going to try to get you again. And that was, again, I lost sleep for months after that. Fast forward the processes that we have in place now, or we absolutely secure the demand process. We're no longer emailing anything at all internally. The demands don't get emailed. If you can't email them, we're not doctoring them at all. We're calling on everything we can possibly call on to verify, so we have those two processes in place. I have to say this: our underwriter gives us, a free wire verification system. We have that, and we also have certified as well. Like there's when I say like we're probably too redundant on the process, we are by design, and I don't care. I've spoken to my payoff department multiple times, and I said, listen, if there is the slightest concern on a file, we're not wiring out. Even if we delay that process a day, even if we delay that process 2 days as a company, if we have to pay extra interest because we didn't make a payoff or didn't send out proceeds, I'll take that call any day. Any day. We right now we're wiring in and out. We're dealing with funds of roughly $200 million a month, right? That's just pumping in and pumping out. That's what was that? $2.5 billion, call it, that we're receiving and we're sending out. That's a huge amount of money. And all it takes is one hit, like to bring you to your knees. So this is why, again, we've made these changes, and it is so important. Why I speak about this, a lot of companies don't talk about this because it's an embarrassing moment, right? Like, oh, you got hacked, maybe you're not secure, maybe you're blah, blah, blah. I don't care. If anything, I want to share our kind of story and my message because hopefully it will help a company out there. There's an agent out there somewhere. Maybe they're in the Midwest, maybe they're in the Texas, wherever they are. Protect your wires. That's the goal to this. And that's the biggest message that I can helpfully deliver to the end.
I would argue probably more secure. We had our CIO of our title agency, we were using a password manager, and they had a very well publicized breach of the master keys. And he said, I recommend we switch to their competitor. And I said, I recommend we stay. They got hit in the mouth. They can taste the iron in that blood. They can't do this again.
That's right.
Or else they won't be here. I said, so believe me, if anybody's over rotating right now, that company's over rotating in my favor as a customer. So, Lisa, what did you, David? Thank you. So maybe we stay on payoffs, and I'm gonna pick a little bit at the buyer side next, David, to kind of future pace you.
Yep.
And I'll do the same thing with you, Lisa, and then we're gonna go to seller impersonation. So I wanna hit the big 3 or 4 themes that we're seeing out there, and then we'll get to insurance and some other stuff to wrap up. But Lisa, what did you do after, you're uncertified for a week, you throw something in Payoff Protect, it pops positive for this is absolutely a scam. You verified it was a scam at your bank. It was right around $500,000. What did the journey look like after that?
We just come together as an office and just really talk it out, everyone in the office. Just thank our lucky stars that, it was caught. The constant training of our employees and just you can't tell them enough to be careful that these things happen. And I think the more that they are, you just can't throw it down their throats too much. You just keep reiterating it, and yeah, and that's what we did. And I'm very involved in our Land Title Association in New Jersey. I'm actually being sworn in as the president on Monday. Yay! But yeah, I get out and I just talk to everyone and tell them, and just tell them our experience and protect other people from doing it. Maybe eventually they'll stop picking on us.
No, I know. I want to believe that. I have to live every day like when you do too. Like they won't, right?
They're not gonna. There's too much money.
We do the same thing, so we will not wire out without using certified in our agency. So either Payout Protect, we got business to business verification, any seller net would get verified. I'm with you 100%, David, that if I have to incur some per diem, I'll do it all day long. I mean, that's just like a nice sleeping agent at night for an owner. Yeah, it'll cost tomorrow morning, I'll have $350 less than I did when I went to bed, but I can pick this up with clear minds. We can go back at it the next day, and we might end up sending a check anyway. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially under, I say the duress, but it almost becomes a duress of trying to understand, is it fraud or is it just we're missing a few pieces here to connect? I'll lead off with buyer side. So buyers, from a consumer perspective, remain incredibly exposed. The earnest money deposits and the cash to close. In our market, there's about 25% of all transactions are taken down in cash, and then they'll go to the mortgage market to either do a big HELOC or refinance out. That's so they could submit that cash offer and be the most competitive. If you're listening and you haven't run that analysis, you should. How many actual, not like cash transactions, are running through your system, and what are you doing intentionally to protect those individuals? We will not start title work unless the consumer, the buyer or buyers, have received certified wiring instructions at order entry. The change management of that took a minute, is you have to have the real estate agent provide the name, the email, and a good contact phone number for those people. And I know that's hard. You're like, Tom, they can't even, sometimes I don't even get an address, and I don't get a purchase price, and then I don't get signatures that come over in .loop or DocuSign. I get it. But again, like Lisa's saying, go out and start educating as to why that's important. We're going to get it sometime anyway. Let us protect them on the front end. David, what are you doing from a buyer perspective?
I think the most important thing that we can all do is just create more awareness. I mean, at the point of opening, at the point of a new transaction, that buyer has to be notified that this is how the wire is going to happen. Don't just send us anything. We will let you know what's the best way to wire to us. Because to your point, that the first-time buyer, they do fall victim. They do get email spoofed and some bogus wiring instructions. I think, to your point, they are most at risk as well. And that's horrible because as you get into an insurance perspective, like they have no insurance for that. So I think our biggest responsibility as title company owners and outspoken leaders of the industry is we have to get the word out as much as we can. Because these are families' life savings. I got 5 kids. If I got hit with wire fraud, yeah, I'm absolutely hurting. Like our trips to Costco are dwindled down to who knows what. Like, so we have to just make sure that the homeowner, along with our companies, but the homeowner remains a priority. That we have to protect them, and if we care about them and this transaction, yes, it's the biggest purchase they'll ever make in their lives, right? We're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars. My wife got hit with some like credit card fraud, right? What they hit her for? They hit her for like $2,500 or something. We got it corrected. Capital One fixed it, blah, blah, blah. But we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in this process. So the more we can create awareness for it, and the more that upfront we can let them know this is what has to happen during this transaction, and this is the process that they're going to go through, the better and safer the transaction will be for everyone.
Completely agree. Lisa, how about specifically, let's tighten the lens on buyers. What are you doing intentionally to protect those incoming, either earnest money or closing obligation?
We've had a couple of buyers that were emailed bogus instructions. We had a few that actually did send out money. Some of it was we got back, and they lost some. So in New Jersey, we are through attorneys. So it's tough. Attorneys don't want to share their clients' numbers and email addresses with us, because then they're not doing their job if we just take over and contact their clients. So it's tough getting email addresses and phone numbers. But we try to tell them, please tell them, do not send any money. It's a case-by-case basis. You know, when you're dealing with people that are not tech savvy, it's every day is a struggle. Every single day, every file is different. We do reach out to the realtors, all the ones that work, or call the office and tell them, please tell your clients that, you know, there's fraudsters out there, and they're going to see emails that look like they're coming from us, but they're not. It's the fraudsters are smart, and they just keep finding other ways to weasel in. And the most that we do is just talk, and try to get their number, their email address, and you know, get on the phone with them directly and tell them that we're not going to send you email address, you know. And now that we have certified, we were able to just send them that.
Yeah, I'll stay on the external, and then I want to ask you each a question about some of the internal struggles you had as you managed change. But the external, and I think we're drinking out of the same cup here, Lisa, that it's hard. It's hard to get the referral partner to understand their role in this. And some of that understanding is just sharing information and sharing awareness. One of the things that we've done, I think, fairly effectively is recruiting the Association of Realtors locally, that they're spreading the message as well. So if they're hearing it from us and they're hearing it from NAR at a really high level, but then they're starting to hear it in the monthly meetings, and they're reading in the newsletter, and they're seeing it in the email blast or the Facebook posts, at some point they will start to fall a little bit more in line. I'll apologize for the bar associations. That's a tougher nut to crack. But one of the ways that we found success is just doing some education on their own E&O policy and their own cyber and the risk associated with that attorney level of protection and awareness, not because they're moving the money, because you're doing that on their behalf or the client's behalf, but there is a standard of care that says you have to notify, you have to empower, and you have to engage these customers that they don't voluntarily send funds to a bad guy thinking they're sending it to a trusted party. Let's flip to internal. So what internal struggles did you and do you currently have when you're wrestling these? Because Lisa, I can hear the pain in your voice of it's just like file by file, and it's like beating my head against the wall, and why don't they just get it? So let me stay with you on this. Like, what has that meant to the organization, and how do you manage that expectation in the workflow?
Our land title association, our underwriters, they're constantly throwing out webinars and seminars on the topic. I think what really hits home is the examples, the real life examples. You can say all you want, oh, you know, the frauds are the frauds, but when you have a real life example, a real life title agent or a buyer that was frauded out of money, it hits home. Our office, my husband and I still, I hate to say it, but we micromanage we still have our hands in every single aspect of the business and every file that goes on, every dollar that goes out. So we try to really micromanage, but you do want to take a day off every now and then, or a trip, and you have to allow your office to protect the funds. So we just train. We talk about it all the time. We share instances, and we're just trying to do the best we can that way.
David, how about you? What have you found internally on managing this?
I touched on it earlier, but my stance is probably the same. We're probably redundant. It probably has slowed down even our process a little bit, but we're simply not gonna, move forward with any file until we feel comfortable with it. Even if there's additional interest that gets paid, even if we have an unhappy agent or seller or buyer, like anyone in the transaction, that they didn't receive their funds, at that exact time, I would rather take that call as a leader and just explain to everyone involved that, our job as the title company is to protect, everyone's interest and everyone's money as well in this process. And if we have to take an extra day to make sure that we feel good about it, then we're going to take that extra day. So like I said, we really secured the process. Does it add more work to our staff? Absolutely it does. Is that work worth it? In my opinion, it absolutely is, and that's a non-negotiable, for me. I mean, just flat out, we have to protect this. And this goes back to the point, once you've been kind of stung once, we are redundant and overly protective by design. And I don't know if I would ever relax in that world, simply because it's not going to stop. Wire fraud is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and better, and they're going to get smarter and develop new ways to hack and new ways to alter and all the above. So, whatever we can do to help get ahead of that process, believe me, we're going to do it at Monarch Title.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's like saying I'm used to driving 70 miles an hour down the highway, but now the highway's all tore up, full of hazards and barrels, and I just might need to slow down. But I'll get there. And I think it's fair to say that because they are getting better. Generative AI and the ability to spoof voices and likenesses like us on video here. I promise I'm real right now. I think the two of you are. We'll see in a year from now. But one of the things that we ran into, because we did everything from multi-factor authentication, pen testing, we locked down so many different external sites in our title organization. And then we recently brought over some talent from outside of our four walls, but from the marketplace. And they're like, yeah, you guys have a reputation of you have the tightest policies around dispersing and funding. And I said, great. Maybe we all can learn from what we've done, because when you have been stung like that, I think what's challenging on both sides is if you're instituting change and they don't understand the why. And Lisa, you said it best. Everybody wants to see a car crash. Everybody does. And you show them the car crash, but then you dissect what happened, how it was preventable, what we're doing to prevent it. We share our monthly email statistics around phishing exercises, around the number of external threats that get blocked by our filters. We share wire fraud stories, and I think that's how you socialize the message to get engagement. I really believe that, and the more we can do that in our communities, I think the more buy-in, because we need our referral partners. They are the first point of contact. They're typically the last point of contact. But that first point of contact at the agency formation of listing agent, or the buying representation now that everybody is signing, hey, there's something out here and you have to be aware of it. And I partner with a company, either one of your companies, that takes this serious. We've gotten to a point now where that's become a narrative and a selling point from our referral partners. And I think that's where you can really, really win. We have our referral partners winning listings and buyer agency because they're also talking about fund security, and they're talking about data and personal information security. All right, I want to get a little bit more granular on some things that we came up with, like three more takeaways to kind of really kickstart this journey, none of which are a heavy lift, but all of it is intentional. And it's like anything. It doesn't have to be hard, but just because it isn't hard doesn't make it easy to do every day. And the first thing is really understanding insurance. David, you had to litigate against your policy. We had no coverage. To, in my head, pencil out the amount that you got back, you must have been at policy limits, not a sublimit, which is amazing. Most insurance policies do not cover wire fraud as a base policy. If they do cover it, it's under some endorsement, and then it's sublimited typically down to $250,000 for outbound only. Inbound is not a direct loss, that's more cost of defense, and we see most policies as a maximum of $50,000 for defense costs. But Lisa, have you gone through the analysis on your policy and your coverages?
So in New Jersey, we have our E&O. We also have a cyber policy, but it's very restrictive. It's very. I think when we first started, it might have been around 2 million, and now I don't think it's more than 250 of coverage. So it definitely decreased in size. So, and it's expensive.
It's super expensive. Yeah, David, what have you? I mean, you went through the gauntlet because you sued your carrier. So
Again, at the time, when you look at like protecting the company, we didn't spare no expense on getting our appropriate coverage. So at the time, we had $4.5 million of coverage that we thought that we had. Our cyber was a mil. We had a big bond, and then we had our big E&O. So I'm sitting back thinking, when it took place, I said, well, it's okay. We're going to get through this. We came out of the money out of pocket to make these transactions whole, right? That's the 1.45. And I'm thinking, okay, let's pull all of our policies. I feel good about it. It's not until you like really dive into the policies, unfortunately, do you realize like, well, wait a second. Our, no offense to cyber policies, like our cyber policy didn't touch this at all. It has nothing to do with wire fraud. So that's gone. But you think on the surface, you're thinking, well, we got hacked, right? We got hacked. This should be part of it. No, our cyber was gone. So now I'm looking at 3.5 mil, and then that process started. And I again, I don't want to dive into these policies because again, we need these policies. That being said, it wasn't as clear cut as like, you got hacked. They doctored your demand. How much should you lose? 1.45. Here's your check for 1.45. Go back to work. We spent a ton of money as a company out the gates to dissect the policy. Even after dissecting the policy, we felt like we should be coverage. Unfortunately, they had another stance on it, to which we had to just keep going through the process. And again, as a young emerging companies, when you're writing, I think our first attorney, we spent $100,000 on them. That's a lot of money when you're already out, 1.5. That's a lot of money. So we end up going with a better attorney, I would call at that point, a contingent attorney that, spent 2 years on this. 2 years. So this was a 3-year window in which we were absolutely handcuffed as a company. Now, did we settle? Yes, we did. Did we settle for the 1.45? No, we did not. We settled at $800,000. That was the decision to make. Now, could we have drawn it out longer? But how long would that process have taken? And how much money could have been earned after that? When you really break down the math, it's like, yeah, we'll gratefully, I guess, take this settlement. It wasn't the happiest day of Monarch title, but at the same point, when you spend 3 years without $1.5 million, you're grateful at some point to settle on something. But just know this: if there's any title company, obviously agents or insurers out there listening to this, yeah, look at your coverages. We got hung up on, it ended up being like a word in our policy. And that was the big debate. Did this include our type of fraud that went on, or did it not include it? And that was the biggest debate.
What did it come down to, whether or not someone was socially engineered versus a system being hacked?
Yeah, so what it came down to was everyone acknowledged Monarch Title had gotten hacked. Everyone acknowledged that fraudsters doctored demands. Everyone acknowledges that. We had to go through forensic computer to verify all this stuff. As no one even debated whether the fraudsters sent the demands to us, on our own behalf internally. But the biggest debate was when it got to the final person, which was a Monarch Title employee. They entered the information of the wire. They hit send. It was not the fraudsters. They did that. Did the fraudsters do everything to get them to that point and defraud us as a company? Yes. But it was still a Monarch Title employee who entered the instructions to the bank and to hit send. And that was the biggest, challenge to our coverage and our policies.
I say that because when it comes to somebody being socially influenced or socially engineered, that's where there's a drop off from any form of coverage, and to be able to throttle full limits on the policy. So I know we didn't talk about that before, and I didn't put you on the spot, but I'm not surprised to hear that it was a debate around, there was a voluntary act at the end that led to the loss. However we got here, there was a voluntary act by your employee. They didn't have access to your banking system, and he or she sent the money voluntarily. Yeah. Tough. All right. No, that's tough. No. I call it tuition. I went many years in school. I'm still paying it, but I don't want to pay that one. I don't want that course again.
It goes to the proactive approach now that we're just not going to go there anyways.
Right.
And the more that we can do up front to make sure that we're never, and again, I sat back thinking we have $4.5 million in coverage. We're golden, right? But guess what? Once you get to that point, like any insurance company, that becomes a debated, item there. And I get it. They're the policy holder. They have a responsibility to hold their policy.
No, but I think it's really important for the listeners to peel this thing apart a little bit. So we had a breach that otherwise is squarely within what we believe we're paying for cyber coverage. But they can't monetize just a breach. They have to sell data. They got to do something after.
Yes.
Right? They're not just hanging out because they're interested in escrow and how files balance and how we prorate taxes.
Our cyber policy did nothing whatsoever. Yeah,
whatsoever. And you were breached.
Yes. The where that thing would have kicked in was if we would have had seller or buyer information, right?
That was resold, and you had to enroll. And
exactly. We had to protect that process.
They're after the big payday, right?
Exactly.
So your cyber's out, your E&O is back in, and now I don't mean to belabor this, but this is the kind of stuff that I can't stress enough for listeners to deeply understand the intersection between your workflow and how information and funds come in and out of the escrow account, and all the policy and the covenants of coverage that you believe you have versus what you'll likely have standing in my shoes, complete denial. David's shoes, you think you're golden, 2 years later you settle for, less than half ultimately back in. So, all right, pivoting. A culture of secure. David, thank you. Lisa, anything else you want to add? I don't want to hate on look, we're all selling insurance, right? We better be a little careful.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
And let me just put a cherry on top. Again, we have all of our policies. We have plenty of policies. And if anything, I won't also discount the policy coverages. I won't we're going to have even more coverage as much as we can. But as the CEO of Monarch Title, I'm not going to depend on the policy, right? And this is where the proactive approach occurs with us and any company out there listening. Like the more proactive we can be on the front end, the more we just don't have to deal with that. Let that be the safety net, but don't lean on that, I would advise of anyone.
I know that not having the policies, they don't want to cover it, you know? I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. It's scary. It's scary that you pay all this money in E&O and cyber and it, because of an employee mistake, it's gonna not, you know, it's not gonna get covered. It's scary. It's very scary. I'm a little flabbergasted.
No, I agree. I think what's scary is that, the premiums have gone up. We've had to increase our coverage amounts because the value of real estate has gone up. But the number one threat that is facing us is something that they essentially pulled away from, either in the ability to buy the specific coverage or in how the policies are drafted with conditions precedent or sublimits or all these things. So, all right, said it best, guys. It's there. You got to have it. Great possible safety net. Don't rely on it. Like, I think the best policy is the one that you bind, throw in the drawer, you never call upon. Right? That's the best form of insurance. Okay. I will say this, though. The policies for certified are specifically designed to cover the transfer of funds. And through our system and some of the protocols that we have lined up with our underwriters really does fill a meaningful gap. But the whole point of the exercise with the technology is, ounce of prevention, ton of cure. So, all right. Creating a culture of security and compliance. And Lisa, you had talked about this, that your go-to-market internally and externally has been through education, awareness, staff training. I'm just curious, are you using any phishing exercises? David, you probably are because your folks got phished. That's a best practice now. Anything else as a leader that you're demonstrating that you have a culture of security?
Like I said, we share the stories. We meet for lunch and meetings a lot and just talk a lot about examples, real life examples and things to look forward to. We thought about it, hiring a company that tests your employees, and we have not did that yet. Like I said, my husband and I, we own the title company. We send the wires out, it goes through us. So a lot of times they will tell us this doesn't look right, or we got a payoff by email and then one came over by fax and they're different. And we're the same way. We don't just send it out just to send it out, even though everyone's barking down our neck with the urgency of everything.
David, what are you doing on the employee readiness and awareness standpoint?
My stance on that, which was probably tricky. I remember when it took place, I called a meeting with a company, and everyone was on this Zoom together, and I said, "Listen, we got hit with a fraud for $1.45 million. This is real. I share with you, two things. Number one, we will get through this, even though probably the look on my face was one of like heartbreak and disgust. I share with everyone, I said, the word will get out. Number one, we will get through this. I promise you that. But number two, like we all have to be part of these preventative measures. And I don't care what it was. Preventative measures, I cannot stress enough, how important that was as a company. And, it simply became a topic of discussion. I don't care if it was an internal meeting or a sales meeting. We're going to talk about this. We're simply going to talk about this, right? What were the cases that we found? What were the cases that we stopped? And what can we do better? Now, I feel, in a relatively good place right now, but it doesn't mean the conversation doesn't stop. We're just going to keep talking about this. Unfortunately, in this process, I've had to depart from, a couple of very, very good employees who simply, were put themselves in a tricky position that I thought was a bit negligent, and put the company at risk. Like, and you got to understand, like, I love my people. I love my people dearly. They become friends. They become everything to me. And, through this journey in the past, I would say 3 years of really securing what we do, we did find a couple of, opportunities that we could have protected. We should have known better. Now, my job as a leader is when I lay out the importance of the companies and the important tasks that we have to do, it's X, Y, and Z, specifically dealing with wires and wire frauds, protecting ourselves. If we cannot, fall in line to that, and if we're going to be negligent, it breaks my heart, but I've had to say goodbye to 2 employees because they didn't protect the company and the consumer enough, flat out. And I don't care how good you are, if you cannot do that, then you can't work at Monarch Title. And those are the toughest decisions that we have to make, right, as leaders of the industry. But at the end of the day, I know what that felt like in 2021. My only goal is to never live through that again, just flat out. So I think everyone was aware that, we're absolutely serious about this, and we're just not talking about it. We have to legitimately make the changes to make sure it doesn't happen again, flat out.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And unfortunately, you institute change and you do it through transparency and through expectations, and you hope that everyone subscribes to that journey. And when some don't, that's where you have to make the tough call as a leader. We'll always be faced with those tough decisions. Well, I want to end with this idea of like not having to go alone and just having more readiness. And it really focuses on incident response. And, Alta has a great incident. I'm on the InfoSec committee. Alta has a great incident response plan. Each of our underwriters will be able to guide us through an incident response. And when I say incident response, which is also a best practice, by the way, under Alta, is making sure that if that day comes when the server's taken over from ransomware, you understand that there's an email compromise. It looks like data has been scraped and lifted off and stolen from the server. You have a buyer showing up for a closing and does not have a check and is explaining they wired a few days ago before the holiday weekend. Or the mortgage payoff doesn't land and the controller or the dispersing team is notifying you, or the seller calls and says, hey, I closed 45 days ago and I got this late payment notice, right? How those come in. Like, where are you on that? And I would just encourage you, without any form of indictment at all, you have to have one, and you have to pre-bed that response. And what pre-bedding means is you have to go through it on your own proactively. So who do you call when you identify that a wire may be missing, right? What happens when you log in, you get a blue screen of death with a message saying, I need some crypto and here's the kiosk address. Or you clearly see that you got an email, you walk down the hall and somebody says, I didn't send you that. And now you have an email compromise. We've touched on so many of these things. And Certified is here as a partner as well. We have a fraud recovery services team. We assist literally hundreds of victims that come inbound on an annual basis. And all I can say, and I mean this, guys, like, proactively look at insurance, set that against your operating procedure, and look through what a proper incident response plan looks like, and start with the funds transfer portion of it. You need to know that your bank has a red phone to red phone to the largest institutions and their fraud desks, because if money is left your account on a mortgage payoff or seller net or commissions or direction of funds, or it doesn't matter, I can keep going, they need to notify that receiving bank that something's awry. And what I like to say is, in incident response mode, nothing should be a learning moment. It is an action moment. It is a response moment. It's not a teaching moment. And if you're dependent on third parties and you're teaching them, I've been asked to call community bank presidents to alert them on how to make the phone call to a large bank and ask for an account to be frozen. And that's unacceptable, right? So with that, quickly, Lisa, incident response, anything to add there? And David, I'll let you wrap.
We have all over our office from Alta, their response. Our underwriters also sent us some, so we do have those posted all over the office. But my first phone call is to my bank, is to the fraud department at the bank. First phone call. You know, if it's everything is always to the bank if money left. And then, you know, we have an IT person. We call that if it's involving emails. But yeah, the first person is the bank to try to stop the transfer.
David, your end?
I'm lucky enough to say we haven't had any recent incidents where I'd have to like produce a response. My biggest thing whenever we've gone through everything is simply just stop everything that we're doing and verify that this is just a one-off, you know, or is this a bigger issue? You know, and I go back to our incident when we learned, when someone at our company learned that it was something had happened, I had yet to be notified yet, right? And that was so important because we just thought it was just a random event, but we simply didn't know. Like fast forward 2 days later, we didn't know that 5 files were affected. And my biggest thing is sound any and all alarms in the company. If we have any suspicion of an email phishing, a funky wire, it could be anything. We're going to stop what we're doing. We're going to let everyone know, this took place. And, my job then is to just kind of freeze the process and let's verify everything. Like literally, we're just going to stop and we're going to triple check everything because the one-offs at many times it could be a bigger situation on your hands. That's probably my best advice. And if you can get out in front of, even if you have one file that was compromised, one file is a lot better than 4 or 5. So that's my biggest thing is we're just going to stop what we're doing. We're going to find out what's taking place right now before we do anything else that could harm the company.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the hot seat one more time with a question. In a few words, if you could get a message out to the industry, to your referral partners and your customers on the issue of just preventing wire fraud, protecting the transaction, what would you say to the industry? What would you say to your referral partners? And what would you say to the consumers? David, I'll let you lead off.
So when you look at the title insurance industry as a whole, like I've kind of narrowed it down to 4 threats to our industry. We're dealing with notary fraud, like that's one threat, right? We're dealing with the sales of vacant land, right? These fraudulent sellers that are out there. That's one set of challenges. Hard money, can be a big challenge in our industry. We deal with that in California, right? That's a big challenge. These are all higher cases of claims or exposure. And then the last one at the end of the day is wire fraud, man. And to me, wire fraud is probably on the forefront to that. My biggest advice to anyone is championing a company like yours. You're really a security blanket for all of us, to adopt, spend the extra money, go through the extra steps, verify 2-3 times. And yes, you may have internal personnel that you can depend on, that you can trust, that are making the calls, right? That are being proactive about this approach. But there's nothing like having a company like Certified to help verify the wires as well. When we got certified, as soon as we first enrolled with you guys, like Lisa said, we stopped a $600,000 wire from going out. Now, did our employee also, was he suspicious of making that payoff? Yes, he was. But did it also not go through Certified appropriately? Yes, it was. Right? So I, as a business owner, as a CEO, I'd rather have 2 giant flags raised, right, than me depending on the employee at our company. Can I depend on them? Yes. Can I trust them? Yes. Are they the best at what they do? Yes. But guess what? I would rather have a redundancy there, protect the company, protect the consumer, the buyers and sellers in this process. So that's why we have Certified.
Oh, love that. Lisa, any parting thoughts to...
Yeah, every single day we face challenges regarding wire fraud. These fraudsters are good. They get better by the day. You know, the security of our escrow funds is our main focus. And, yeah, I procrastinated. You heard so many stories about, you know, the wire fraud programs. What scared me into finally making the phone call, I saw a certified webinar. Allie Faith gave it. And she just shared so many examples of the horror stories. And I got back to the office and made the phone call. And, you know, it helps us sleep a little bit better at night. So it's scary. Wire fraud is scary. And you know, I just recommend to everyone just sit through one of those webinars, or if you're lucky enough to see her in person like I did. And, yeah, take the step. It's worth it. I mean, first week alone saved our company $500,000 just about. So that literally would have shut our doors in a market like this. So I'm thankful.
Yeah. Well, we thank each of you for the time. I put a QR code. If those of you that are listening want to start the journey with Certified in our team, I can tell you that our hearts are just like yours. We're trying to make the industry a safer, more transparent, and just better place to conduct business in light of the existential threat that we find ourselves in with these bad actors. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Thank you for attending this installment of To Catch a Fraudster. Lisa and David, so well done. Thank you for the courage and the candor of today. It really does mean a lot.